Okay, so now we're going to finish up this section and we're going to talk about iterating through objects. Now, this is definitely one of those little small nuances that you need to understand about objects, and that is how to iterate over an object. See, there are certain methods that are for arrays that we can't use on objects, and that method is called a map method. We're going to use that quite a lot when you get over into React. So it's the best to really understand how this particular concept works, because you have to understand you can't loop over an object because of the keys, the key value pair. So you have to use a special for loop. So you have to remember that, because when we get over into React, we're going to have to loop over objects, and we're going to use the map method. But the thing is, you got to understand, in order to use that map method, it has to be on an array. So objects need to go inside of an array in order for you to map over them. We'll make that clear and help you to understand that once we get into the React portion of the course. But for now, let's understand these fundamentals. That's going to help you better understand how objects work. So if you're new to this channel and you would like to follow along with the curriculum, the link is in the description. Okay, let's get into it. Iterating through objects. We can iterate through all of the values in an object, much like we would do with an array. We will use a for loop to do that, but with a slightly different structure. For in. Loops are specifically designed to loop through the properties of an object. Each iteration of the loop accesses a key in the object. The loop stops once it has accessed every property. Here's our example of the giraffe object. Remember the syntax and understand how it works. Inside of an object, we have to give it a variable name, and we're going to store the object inside of the variable name. And this is how we write our keys. It's a string, which is a species, which is called species, which is key number 1, separated by a colon, and then whatever data type we want to pass it. Here we have a string, number, and another string. And then next we have a for item in giraffe. Now look at how this is formatted. For item means all of these items that are inside of the object in giraffe, which is the object. And then when we console.log item, concatenating the quotes with the space, with the comma, and then we're concatenating the actual object, and we're passing in the item, which we're using the array bracket. Now, or better yet, we're using the square bracket to be able to get the items out of the object. And so as we notice here, we get the output, and it says the species and reticulated giraffe, and then we have the name, the weight, the age, and the date. These are all the keys. It printed them all out for us. And so notice, remember, in order to get access to an object, we're going to have to use the dot notation or the bracket notation. And it's giving us all the properties, the keys and the properties that are inside of this actual object. Now, in this example, item is a variable. Pay attention, item is a variable. When you understand what a variable is, we know that that can be whatever we want to call it. But this makes sense. Item, we want each item that is inside the object. Just like with an array has items in it, or a collection of data. And each one of those collections are associated with what we call the index. But here, the item, we don't go by the index because objects don't have index, they have keys. Now, that holds the string for each key. It is updated with each iteration of the loop. Just like a for loop, it still goes through the iteration. When you hear the word iteration, you have to think loop. Inside a for-in loop, we can only use bracket syntax to access the property values. Now, here in the chapter example directory in the JavaScript project objects math directory, inside the for-in loop, write a for-in loop to print to the console the values in the tortoise object. This is your guideline right here on how to do it right here. We told you what to do right here. So as you go through and you print them out, when we see the word print, we know we're looking for a console.log. So I want you to play around with it. We're at the point now where you need to play around with the code on your own. Now, objects and functions. Programmers can pass an object as the input in a function, or use an object as the return value of the function. Any change to the object within the function would change the object itself. Pay attention to what we're saying. So here we have our setup, and we have our object giraffe, and we're passing in some keys and values. Now here we have a function, and that function is called birthday, and we're passing it in a parameter. And then what we're saying, animal.age, and we're assigning animal.age plus 1. Return animal. So we want to increment by 1. So this is dynamic. We're not hard coding anything. We're just using the parameters because now we're going to pass in the argument. Now, if you notice here, we have a console.log giraffe age, which is 15. And now we're passing in the function. We're invoking the function, and we're passing the object. Now, as you can see here, we're passing that object inside of the actual function. Now, when we console log giraffe.age now, and we're passing in that function, it incremented by 1. Now, on line 16, when the birthday function is called, giraffe is passed in as an argument and returned after the function called giraffe.age increased by 1. And notice here again, when we get into understanding that we're going line by line, the compiler knows to go line by line. So once it hits this function didn't mean anything until we actually invoked it. It's just defined right here. It doesn't go in any particular order. And once we hit the console.log first, it goes through this actual giraffe object, and because we're using a dot notation, we want to get access to the age, which is 15. Then it goes down to the function, which we pass in giraffe as the argument, and then we console.log.age. Now, it did not print at that moment, the giraffe. When we called it, invoked it, it didn't print anything until we did the actual print on line 18. But it did go line by line. It went to 14, 16 was invoked, and then 18. So it printed this one, invoked this line, and then it printed it out. Okay, so check your understanding. We've made it to the end of this section. As we are building upon the layers that we've already taught you, all the concepts that we're teaching you, we're just adding more stuff to it, and then we're going to continue to bring it all together. It's important that you practice the code. The more you do, the more you improve. That's my statement. And I'm going to stick by that because I understand, and you're learning now, that the more you practice, the better you're going to become at this. So continue to do so that you can improve. Okay? So now I'll see you in the next section.